another, I think, very valuable presentation coming to us from California. I would say that if you talk to, let's say, a cross-section of the best teachers and teacher leaders in America, and ask them who is the person on the national level that you most respect and admire and have learned from, they would say Dr. Linda Darling Hammond of Stanford University. Now, she's going to be with us here in just a moment. I'm going to sit in the middle chair. She was planned to be here in person, you all. She loves North Carolina, been here so many times, but she's got that throat, and I don't know, hope it's not the flu, but they wouldn't let her travel on the airplane where it gets all congested up, as you know. So we're going to have her on these big screens here. She'll probably talk about 20 minutes or so, and then I'll ask her some questions, encourage you to ask her questions because she wants to take them. Let me say to you, however, that the next session after this one is also going to be a great session on a vision for education. There are three people here that I want you to know about. I'll introduce them later, but from Best NC, we have Walter McDowell that I've mentioned earlier, who used to head Wachovia Bank. He's now chairman of Best NC with about 100 of the top corporate companies in North Carolina as members. Brenda Berg, who's the executive director of that work, is here with us, and we appreciate her work. And I am delighted, and I don't know if she's in the room right at this moment or not, but Ann Goodnight has been doing great work, and she will be here through the remainder of this session. Is she here? Where is Ann? Okay, well, she'll be here. Ann is on the UNC Board of Governors. She and her husband and the SAS Corporation are probably the top corporate leaders in education and supporting education, encouraging, doing everything in the world you can to support education and developing new ideas that we all can learn from and benefit from. Ann is personally leading a committee on the Board of Governors that is developing new ideas, making new proposals about how we can make teaching more attractive, how we can recruit more good people into teaching, how we can support them better in the profession. And I am very proud. She can't talk about it yet because she hadn't taken a report to the Board of Governors. But you'll be seeing it the latter part of this month, and I think it is going to make great recommendations that all of us will be proud of. So with that, I'm going to sit down here where I can watch you, and we'll have some questions. But let's just to get started, Linda, we've had about 50 members of our legislature here. Even though the legislature begins tomorrow in Raleigh. Some of them have had to go down early for some early committee meetings. But Linda Darling Hammond is a great professor. In fact, her title is Charles E. Ducommun Professor of Education at the Stanford Graduate School of Education. Now, let me tell you two things I've done with her that I've had the honor of doing with her. We created, and she was the leader, I worked with her, she was executive director, I was the chairman, something called the National Commission on Teaching and America's Future. Linda, I think we created that back about the early or mid-'80s, and we had a 2-year study.
Probably the 90s.
Am I about right on that?
About the early 90s.
Okay, early 90s. I get my terms as governor mixed up. and that went about 2 years. I got to chair those meetings all over America. And she was the brains behind it, and we had great participation like we're having from you all this morning, and came out with a great report on what we needed to do to support teaching in America. 10 years later, we came back and kind of updated it. And those reports are available to all of you, and a lot of those recommendations are still very good. Then later, of course, she served on the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. And I want to remind everybody, there are 100,000 nationally board certified teachers in America. These are among the very best. 20,000 of them are in North Carolina. 1/5 of America's nationally board certified teachers. And this, the lady, is the inspiration for. So now, Linda, we're asking you to talk with us, share with us some of the best practices and best things that are happening in America for retaining and advancing high-performing teachers. So if you will go ahead, I'm going to sit down and watch you, and then after you finish, we'll have some questions from our legislators, and we'll move forward. Linda Darling-Hammond.
Great. It's wonderful to be there, at least virtually, and thanks goodness for all this modern technology. I'm going to talk just briefly about some of the big ideas, both in North Carolina and elsewhere in the country and around the world, for retaining and advancing high-performing, highly effective teachers. Obviously, teachers are at the heart of everything we need to do to advance student learning and education. Some years ago, after conducting a big study that found how powerful the teacher influence is, Ron Ferguson put it this way: what the evidence suggests most strongly is that teacher quality matters and should be a major focus of efforts to upgrade the quality of schooling. Skilled teachers are the most critical of all schooling inputs. And from his work, you can see one way of depicting that, which is that if you think on average about gains in achievement from 1 year to the next, this happens to be in mathematics, but it's also true in English language arts, about half of the influence on those gains is often home and family factors that structure the learning environment outside of school. And about half of it is in-school factors, of which the lion's share is teachers, what they know, how they've been developing their craft, and how they use that. Other things like class size and school size can make a difference, but teachers are a major influence. There was a study some years ago in North Carolina which found that a 1% increase in teacher quality was related to a 3 to 5% decrease in student fail rates on North Carolina's state examinations. And the authors of that study made a similar claim of inputs which are potentially controllable. Our analysis indicates the quality of teachers will do more for students who are most educationally at risk, those prone to fail, than reducing the class size or improving the capital stock by any reasonable margin which would be available to policymakers. Part of the point they're making that comes up in study after study is that high-quality teachers have the greatest effect on students who may have fewer advantages in learning outside the classroom. And one of our challenges in policy is getting those high-performing, highly effective teachers into the schools that serve the highest need students. So I take that as part of the policy problem that you are addressing. So what matters for teacher quality? When we say an increase in teacher quality, what are we talking about? Well, there have been some large studies, one of them in North Carolina not too long ago, and another in New York that had very similar findings. They found that student achievement gains were related to teachers having a strong academic background in their content area. That was related also to teachers having a strong preparation before they entered the workforce. Certification in the field that they teach, experience, and particularly after 3 years, teacher experience shows a great effect on effectiveness. And in North Carolina, because there's so many national board certified teachers, they found that national board certification also was related to student achievement gains. And that's a finding we've had in many studies. National board certification is strongly related to teacher effectiveness in helping students gain more achievement and learning. In North Carolina, the study found that those factors, if you put that all together, they predicted more of the difference in student learning gains than race and parent education combined. Each of them was important in its own right, but if you have a teacher as a student who has a strong academic background, was well prepared before they came in, was certified, is experienced, has national board certification, your gains are going to be tremendous. But what often happens is that those teachers, some kids get year after year of those kinds of teachers, and other kids get year after year of teachers who are inexperienced, are not yet certified, have not finished their preparation, are not fully prepared in their content area, haven't developed those skills that are measured by board certification, and that creates a lot of the achievement gap in education. So one framework for policymakers is that policies should strengthen and equalize these teachers. Policies that control licensing, who is allowed to practice, policies that control the distribution of teachers or create incentives for distributing teachers, should take those kinds of factors into account. And obviously, if you're going to retain high-quality, high-performing teachers, you have to recruit them first. And so that front end of the pipeline is really important. So the big policy question is, how can we get the whole profession full of such high-quality, caring, competent, and qualified teachers? And I add the phrase, in schools organized for success, because it turns out that keeping high-quality teachers has a lot to do with whether the school is organized to allow them to be successful. Because at the end of the day, great teachers care the most about being effective with their students, and they are most likely to leave if the school does not organize the work in a way that allows them to be effective. And I'll return to that idea in just a few minutes. Interestingly, many of the answers to this question have come from North Carolina. And I've done studies of the work in North Carolina. I've published several of them because it has been so noteworthy. It's been studied by lots of people, including the National Achievement Governing Board and others. But there were two big waves of reform. Not incidentally, they did coincide with Governor Hunt's two sets of terms in office in the 1980s and the 1990s. And North Carolina took a very holistic approach to raising teacher licensing standards, requiring that teachers would know more about content and how to teach that content and how to teach diverse learners so that all kids would get access to the curriculum. North Carolina was one of the first states to require all of its public universities to be nationally accredited in teacher education, which really raised the bar for teacher education performance in the state. North Carolina created a beginning teacher mentoring program long ago before it was widespread in other states. One of the most innovative programs that has traveled to many places, the North Carolina Teaching Fellows, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I know it's come across some hard times with the budget cuts recently. I hope that's temporary. A program where some of the best and brightest in North Carolina were recruited into teaching, given scholarships to engage in a higher quality preparation with some additional components in the summertime. A disproportionate number of male teachers and teachers of color came through that program, teachers in math and science and other shortage areas. The study showed that not only did they stay in teaching at much higher rates, 75% still teaching after 7 years, and many of the others already moved into administration and principalship and other kinds of roles like that. But also studies found that they were more effective in producing student achievement gains than, on average, other teachers in North Carolina. So a highly effective program. I'll tell you that we are borrowing the features of that program right now for an initiative in California that's about to be proposed. So something that many of us around the country truly admire. The reforms that built a profession also in the 1990s decided, actually this was Governor Hunt's term, to raise the teacher salaries in North Carolina to the national average. And that was accomplished in about 4 years, and to reward the best teachers who received national board certification with a 12% pay increase in the salary schedule. Very important. It's helped to retain many of those people in the profession rather than moving on to other careers. Lots of investments in high-quality professionals development, including things like the North Carolina Center for the Advancement of Teaching, a set of teacher networks organized around subject matter like the writing project and math projects and so on, that really allow teachers to learn from each other in collegial ways, and something that we know actually keeps people in the profession. And what happened as a result of those reforms was that those teacher investments created the largest gain in student achievement that occurred anywhere in the country. This shows you from 1992 to about 2003, the very steep gains. North Carolina was well behind the national average. Like many states in the South, it became the first state in the South to sort of break the glass ceiling and raise achievement to above the national average. And in those 10 years, the gains were so steep, they were written up by the National Achievement Governing Board, and the reduction in the achievement gap between black and white students was so large that it was the most prominent in the entire country. You can see that after 2003, those gains kind of have leveled off, and North Carolina has been coasting a little bit in the last years. Some of the programs and reforms and investments I talked about have been maintained to some degree. Others have not been maintained, and this is a moment, I think, for North Carolina, like many other states, to take stock and think about how to build on its successes and move again in a more aggressive way in the future. So what more have we learned about policies that promote effective preparation, high-quality mentoring, evaluation, and career development for retaining the best and also for getting those great teachers to the high-need schools? Among the things that we've learned, both from work in the United States, but also I do work in many countries around the world that are leading countries in terms of their achievement, that professional teaching standards can be a very important tool in guiding not only preparation, development, and evaluation. Those national board standards have been that were developed back in the late 1980s and informed the National Board Certification are a godsend. They have been used in many places to guide preparation of teachers and professional development, and also teacher evaluation, not only in the context of board certification, but also on the job in school districts. Having teachers be able to see in the standards what's expected, what do we know is likely to improve achievement, and organize their learning and their practice around those standards. We know it really matters if teachers are strongly prepared clinically. Like doctors, teachers have to know how to do teaching, not just the theory of teaching, not just some facts about teaching, but they've got to have this very amazing capacity, really, to do 100 things at one time, to attend to the needs of 25 or 30 children at once, to know where every kid is in their learning, to organize interesting and engaging activities that move children to greater understanding, to diagnose whether they're succeeding with every child, to assess that learning, to regroup and plan to address the gaps or the needs that appear. That you have to learn to a great extent. While theory is helpful, you have to learn it on the job. And so places that are now working on how to strengthen that clinical preparation also find that it helps teachers stay in the profession, because when they come into teaching, they don't wipe out, they don't wash out, because they really know what they're doing. Expert mentoring and coaching, which is being developed in deeper and deeper ways in many states and countries. Professional development that is in these collaborative professional communities, which is how teachers learn most effectively. That kind both raises achievement, changes practice, raises achievement, and makes teachers feel really excited about staying in the profession. And then career ladders that can develop and spread teachers' expertise. I'm going to take just a couple more minutes to talk about a few of these things, and then we'll just talk about whatever is of interest to you. So I mentioned earlier that in order to retain great teachers, you've got to recruit them first. And we should be able to really raise the bar so that every single teacher coming in is ready to hit the ground running. There have been some studies that have found that some teacher education programs produce graduates who are more likely to produce larger student learning gains and to stay in the profession. And those are usually the places that have well-designed student teaching. They offer more coursework in the content area and how to teach that content. They bring theory and practice together. They don't just teach them separately. They focus on teaching specific practices that teachers can immediately go apply in the classroom in their student teaching, which is happening right alongside of the coursework. They're studying curriculum and having usually a portfolio or performance assessment at the end that is helping them put theory and practice together. And in the best cases, they're teaching in model schools. You'll find this in Finland, in Australia, in many places in North Carolina at one time, professional development schools where teachers would be learning to teach under the wing of expert teachers while they take their university coursework. Those were at one time funded in the state, and there are still a number of these kinds of schools remaining, these model schools where you learn how to practice state-of-the-art. Both send teachers in more prepared. They produce higher achievement, but they also stay in the profession much longer because they have had the benefit of learning and knowing what they're doing before they get there. We're also finding that teacher performance assessments, like the National Board Portfolio, which have now been developed for beginning teachers. There's one in use in 10 institutions in North Carolina called the EdTPA, where teachers learn to show how to can plan a curriculum and teach it and assess student learning and demonstrate that their students have learned in a portfolio that's scored by other teachers, like the National Board. That those kinds of assessments measure teachers' effectiveness and improve their abilities and help improve teacher education so that they're getting input about whether their candidates really can teach and what they know, what they don't know, and how to strengthen that curriculum. And once again, when teachers are better prepared, they stay longer. We know that teachers leave the profession when their preparation isn't adequate. They leave at higher rates. If they don't get enough mentoring, if they don't have good professional working conditions. And it turns out that administrative leadership matters enormously. If you ask teachers what will keep them in the schools where they are, they'll say it's a good, supportive principal who helps them continue to grow in their learning and work effectively with other teachers to help students learn. If you want to improve teaching, one big piece of it is you also have to focus on how to improve leadership and administration. And it's well worth doing this work to reduce attrition because the attrition of beginning teachers costs almost $20,000 for every recruit who leaves, money that we could be spending on mentoring to ensure that people get better. And it costs our nation about $7 billion a year, chunks of that in each of the states. So we know that people, as I said, who've been prepared are twice as likely to stay as those who have not had certain kinds of preparation. We know that quality induction reduces that attrition and enhances competence. And we've seen some of the most outstanding mentoring programs in a number of states. Actually, South Carolina right now is, according to the survey data, leading the country in the pulling together all of the components of mentoring that make teachers more likely to stay and to be very effective in staying so that those who leave are the ones that ought to leave and not the ones who should have stayed. And that usually involves expert coaches who are in the same content area, who are both modeling those expert approaches and coaching in the classroom. It involves collaborative planning time with peers, and it involves teachers engaged with others in further study in certain areas, like how do you address particular special needs of students that are require a lot of sophisticated understanding? How do you work with parents? And the other thing that goes with that is high-quality professional learning. Teachers will tell you, and research will support them, in saying that the usual kinds of professional development that many of them get, which are sort of one-shot workshops after school, sometimes we call it drive-by or spray and pray, that doesn't change practice, and the studies tell us it does not improve learning. But the kind of professional learning opportunities that impact practice, many of these are coordinated in North Carolina by the Center for the Advancement of Teaching and some of those other networks, are really grounded in the problems of practice. They're connected to teachers' work with their kids. They're sustained and continuous over time. A lot of coaching, modeling from expert teachers connected to that collaborative work and integrated into the school reforms. That means your leaders in schools need to know how to organize that professional development. It means that the legislature needs to fund that kind of professional development. It means that schools need to provide time in the school week for teachers to do this kind of collaborative planning and learning. In the high-achieving countries around the world, teachers typically get at least 15 hours a week of collaborative learning and planning time. In the United States, it tends to be 3 to 5 hours a week that teachers have for planning, usually all by themselves, not always in a team. Now, some schools are working hard to change that, to create more time for this kind of work, because when you do, the quality of lessons becomes much, much higher. And then there's the question of, how do you get great teachers into high-need schools? Some states have tried bonuses, combat pay. We'll pay you $5,000. One point, South Carolina was paying $18,000 to get high-performing teachers into high-need schools. It's very hard for that to be effective. In fact, they found that they could only fill about 20% of the positions, even with those large bonuses, in high-need schools. And one teacher explained why bonuses were not enough and what teachers are really looking for. And this resonates because I've heard this from probably hundreds of teachers. And he said, I'd moved to a low-performing school, but I want to see social services for parents and children so that the setting allows them to come to school kind of ready to learn, accomplished leadership, adequate resources and facilities, flexibility, freedom, and time. Those schools have to be good working places. They have to have the conditions where you can be successful. One of the single greatest factors in school success is principal leadership. Effective administrators are magnets for accomplished teachers. Finally, as an accomplished teacher, my greatest fear is being assigned to a hard-to-staff school and not being given the time and the flexibility to make the changes that I believe are necessary to bring about student achievement. And you have some work going on in North Carolina in the sort of the Opportunity Culture Initiative, where teachers are having a chance to redesign jobs and create new teaching roles and work to change the context. And that's usually what drives the best teachers. They're more attracted by success and the opportunity to be effective than by different kinds of bonus pay schemes typically. So we've seen a few things I'm going to mention, and then I'm going to close, about how teachers, given the opportunity for leadership to redesign schools, to redesign their practice, to share their expertise with others, have turned around schools. There are a number of schools that have actually had teachers across the whole school participate in national board certification. They've studied together, they've learned together, they've put their portfolios together. They've looked at each other's videos, they've talked about their practice, put that in, and they've seen school-wide not only gains in achievement for students that have been quite remarkable, but also a coherent staff where turnover is ended, where teachers want to stay, where teachers become experts and more accomplished together, and build that collegial setting that is the long-term attractive. And there are some states looking at how to incentivize that school-wide participation in board certification. There are some places where teacher evaluation, instead of being an individual activity, has been tied to collective goal setting, where teachers in departments and grade level teams set their goals together and decide together on what kind of learning evidence they want to use to evaluate the gains that they're making with students, and share their practices together and work together to improve collectively. And that has shown tremendous outcomes for kids, as well as incredible retention glue for teachers. And then there have been places where teacher leadership training has been tied to teacher coaching and school improvement initiatives. And one great example was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. They had a program there where they took 9 schools that needed turnaround, replaced the leadership, brought in some very high-performing teachers with bonuses, a few. They couldn't get too many to want to make the move to these high-need schools. But then they let all the teachers in the school undertake a leadership training for a master's degree in leadership together, engage with board certification, create a coaching system and a peer review system, design their school improvement initiatives. They got tremendous gains in achievement. And interestingly, the most effective teachers were the ones who had started out in those schools and got that opportunity to learn together and carried the reforms over the finish line. They became schools that no longer had high turnover, but had a lot of commitment from their teachers. High-achieving nations do a lot of these things. Strong universal preparation. They prepare in Finland and Singapore and Canada. All their teachers get free preparation with a subsidy while they're training. Quality mentoring, competitive and equitable salaries, so teachers are paid as well as other college graduates. We're falling behind in the United States. The average teacher in the U.S. is paid 60% of the average college graduate. We have to do better on that if we really want to value teaching. This time that I mentioned for collaborative planning is commonplace, allows those collegial learning opportunities, and a lot of work on career ladders. I'm going to show you very quickly one example from Singapore, where every teacher has the opportunity over the course of their career, if they want to move on a advancement ladder, to move up either a teaching track, a leadership track, which leads from department head to vice principal, principal, and then all the way up into the Department of Education, the ministry, or a leadership track for specialists, curriculum specialists, and assessment specialists, and so on. On any of these tracks, whether they want to become a senior teacher or a lead teacher or curriculum specialist, if they are evaluated and found to have leadership potential, and they've raised their hand and said, I'm going to work hard and want to pursue this track, they get free training to learn the skills on any one of these tracks, and then they become a resource in the school. So those mentors come from the senior teachers and the lead teachers. They work with others around action research and lesson study and building the quality of practice in the school. And we see the same kind of work going on in Shanghai. Some other countries like Australia are beginning to look at how to do this by taking something like board certification and merging it into a career ladder. So there's a lot of work going on to learn from around the world for how to not only retain effective teachers, but use their expertise to improve the entire profession, to improve the entire school. So a goal for high-achieving 21st century states, I would say, first of all, is to get past that old negative saying that those who can do and those who can't teach, to a place where we can say those who can do and those who understand teach. And furthermore, to get to a place where we say those who can teach and those who can't go into a less significant line of work. Thank you very much.
Linda, that was just wonderful. You really covered the waterfront, and What a great leader you are, and what a great national resource for teaching in schools and children and all of us. Folks, this has been wonderful. We have just heard from America's expert on teaching. Linda, thank you very much for a terrific job.
My pleasure.